Hey, what's up? Dave with Brazos Valley Strength. Today we're going to be talking about powerlifting meets. And for the most part, we're going to be talking about a competitor's first competition, or at least one of their first few competitions. So with that in mind, there are going to be a few things that people asked me on Instagram that are going to be omitted here. We're not going to be talking about weight cutting. And I think that may be a good place to start, is just people's expectations and what they should be looking for in their first meet. So weight cuts, I think, is probably one of the ones that pretty much everybody sees online from coaches like myself or other people. When coaches are asked what people should do for their first competition, I would say not cutting weight is probably one of the very highest things on that list. But still, even athletes that I coach are just convinced that they should cut weight for competition. And I get it, right? It's a sport and it kind of makes you feel like you're in with the crowd of people that are doing it. But genuinely, I don't think that as many people should be cutting as really they think they do. And over my time through competitions, I've seen a huge amount of my own competitors move dramatically away from weight cuts in general, me being one of them. I think a lot of us have had really, really good training. You know, we train a few kilos over our weight class, 3, 4, 5 kilos at times, and think, oh, that'll be an easy cut. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it really doesn't. And that ends up being a really big detriment to even people at the highest level. So if you're somebody who is inexperienced on competitions or at competitions in general, it's just not something that is really going to add a lot of value to you as a competitor at this moment, and even potentially long term. I plan on making another video here just about gaining weight or just weight classes overall. And I think this video as a whole feels like there's gonna be a lot of missing pieces. I'm gonna mention a few videos that I'm going to make in the future, so come back for those. As usual, most of my videos are kind of a bigger or a smaller piece, I guess, of the bigger puzzle. Anyway, weight cutting is just not something that people should do heading into their early competitions. And one way to think about it is that I would say the argument for weight cutting would be that you're gonna be more competitive in a lower weight class. But at a local meet, I don't know that it's that easy. I don't know that it's that predictable. I do local meets sometimes. So if you're a local level competitor, if it's one of your first few competitions, and your goal is to go in and win your weight class at a local meet, that is largely a product of just who shows up, right? There could be a very good national level competitor, top 10, top 5 competitor that decides they want to do that competition. You're not going to beat them, right? So you actually could do better in a weight class by moving up. Not that you will, it's just unpredictable. And that leads me to probably the main point here, is you should not judge your success at an early competition based on your placing. It just isn't something that's super relevant because you're at the mercy of who shows up and who doesn't. You could be in a weight class with 0 other lifters in your weight class, or it could be a very, very stacked one and you could have a bad time there if you're only looking at placing. So your personal goals should outweigh anything else at a local competition, for sure. If this is your first meet, don't cut weight. Don't even think about it. If you come in a few pounds overweight, that's okay. You can make those decisions moving forward as you move into your 4th, 5th, 6th competition, whatever, and get more experienced with all of the other things. So basically, if you're in a position that you're watching this video at all, to where you're looking for advice on how to do better at competitions, I just don't think weight cutting is for you. Also, on top of that, one of the biggest things that I mentioned is just having goals for yourself and going after those and not worrying too much about your competitors or what the placing matters at local meets. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that newer competitors have, and still people that I coach, they make the mistake of feeling like they have to have the biggest day possible. That they look at some of their estimated maxes or even just their goals in general. We'll make up numbers. 500-pound squat. You're somebody who has been hitting mid to upper 400-pound squats in training. Some of them have been pretty good. Some of them have been tough. And your goal absolutely is to squat 500 pounds. I said this in my setback video, is that this is never your last competition. And if you're in an early competition, the best thing that you can do to get better at hitting these numbers on the platform is get better at choosing the right number, get better at competing. Sure, absolutely one of the biggest goals, one of the biggest reasons that we go to local meets in general, is to hit these numbers on the platform, right? Me squatting 700 pounds or deadlifting 800 pounds. I did in the gym before I did in the competition, but it wasn't all that meaningful. But there were many meets that I thought I was gonna be able to do those things and missed them and missed them and missed them. And it just end up being set back, and your total ends up reflecting maybe not the strength that you actually had. And the best thing that you can do is learn to just make those competitions or make those lifts in competition. So that's gonna be one of the biggest things that we talk about here, is just attempt selection. I'm gonna have some resources available down in the description down below. I'm gonna make available for you my own attempt planner that I use. As far as spreadsheets go, this one I haven't put a ton of work into, so maybe it's not as cool as my normal spreadsheets that I use. But you can find this one. It'll be in the same area as my website and free programs and all that. So just make a copy of it. But I'll give you a little overview on how to use it when we get to that part. But maybe jumping ahead, you cannot outdo a bad plan. If you have a bad plan based on unrealistic expectations, you're just not gonna be able to overcome those things. So when we talk about the openers, planned third attempts and all of those kind of things, your goal as an early competitor is to make every attempt that you possibly can. So that will probably be a good starting point to lead us into the rest of the video here. So most of what I'm gonna be talking about here is actually going to be directed at people competing in USA Powerlifting. That's not gonna be exclusively for USA Powerlifting. Most of what I say here will apply to other federations, but some of the specific rules about like 2-hour weigh-ins and even like feet being flat on the bench, on the floor when you're benching, are going to be specific to USA Powerlifting. So that probably leads to a very good point. Read the rule book. If you are heading into a competition, every federation, at least as far as I know, any reputable federation, has their rulebook available online. They're very, very easy to access. For the most part, these rulebooks are not gonna be very different from each other, but some of the major distinctions are going to be things like if you have to have all of your fingers around the barbell when you squat. Most of the time the thumb is not a finger, whatever. But some federations don't have you have even your pinky. You can have some fingers off of the bar. Some federations don't make you have your feet flat on the floor. Lots of little things like that, weigh-in timing, are distinct from federation to federation. So it's important that you know what those rules are and just make sure that you're lifting to a standard that really matters. So going in, that's one of the biggest things, is just understanding that you're fitting the rules. I missed a great many of the differences there. Those are not the only differences. So I would just scan the rule book and make sure that you have a good familiarity with what you're looking for and making sure that you're actually training to a standard that matters. But this video is not going to be about all of those kind of things. It's just going to be about the day itself. So what I always recommend new competitors do is go the night before. Pretty much every competition will allow some level of early equipment check and rack heights and just getting familiarized with your environment there. And that is going to be the biggest thing for new competitors, is you're just gonna be nervous. You're gonna feel like you're out of sorts. It's gonna be an exciting and kind of scary experience, and all of that stuff is to be expected. Even now, as an advanced level competitor, I'll go and do my equipment check early. I'll check out the warm-up room. I just get familiarized with what the event is going to be like. So when it comes day of, I'm not worried about rushing around and trying to find where I need to be. So preparing early is going to be something that makes a really, really big difference, especially if you're somebody who doesn't really have great familiarity with the racks that people use in competition. They will always have a rack available for you to get your rack heights for squat and bench press. Not only is it important for you to be able to get these rack heights so that you have them available for the competition, sometimes they let you submit them online ahead of times. Other times you turn them in at weigh-ins. Either way, I would take a note of your phone, whether you submit them early or not. Just make a note of what those rack heights are. But when you go early to the meet, you can learn those competition racks. So that's something that I think a lot of the newer competitors find themselves in a bad situation as they show up and they don't realize that potentially the racks that are in the warm-up room may be different than the racks that are on the platform. Check. They will almost always have the meet set up when it's time to do weigh-ins, or you can ask. If they have a rack that's set aside for you to be able to do equipment checks and get your rack heights, that will be the rack that's on the platform. Get your rack heights on that. Don't worry if you're later in the warm-up room and the rack might be different. The brands have different rack heights and everything. So use that rack that is set aside, or at least use one that's very, very similar. But I would recommend using the one that's on the platform, or the one that they have set aside to be able to actually get the appropriate rack heights. But if you mess that up and you get out to the platform and it ends up being a little bit off, you can always change it, and we'll go over that when we get to scoring. So anyway, get there ahead of time, check your rack heights, get everything situated, find out where you have to weigh in, drive to the gym, whatever, just figure out where you need to be. So morning of, we're assuming it's a 2-hour weigh-in. Pretty much always competitions will have lot numbers. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to be on lift and cast. So this is another benefit, maybe one of the bigger benefits of competing in USA Powerlifting or any IPF federation, is that most of the time they use an app, a software called Lift and Cast. So it's online scoring. And I'm gonna come up with some screen records for stuff like this to show attempt selection or attempt planning and the order of everything. But anyway, the home page of Lift and Cast, let's see, looks like this. So all your competitions are right there. So you can find your competition, and I'll just choose one. Oh, let's go here. Uh-oh. Let's try that again. All right. So we're going to choose a competition. And all of it will come up, the home page, with just everything organized by weight class. But what I would recommend is go to top left corner and we can click on roster. So then we can scroll through and we can see everybody's names on what platform that they're on and what session they're in, right? And we can scroll through there and we can see when you're going to be competing. So if you're in flight A, B, C, whatever, that stuff is very, very important for you to know. You will also have lot numbers assigned to you, which I guess let's see where we can find that. These aren't assigned yet, but in the weight class, or a lot of times you can just click on your name and that will come up with your lot number. It's always going to go by what session you're in, right? And what flight that you're in. So let's say there's just one session. Everybody it's gonna be a 1-session meet and there's 3 flights. You'll always weigh in the order of those flights, but within those flights, it could be randomized. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm gonna address this stuff later when I come to warm-ups a little bit more specifically. Sometimes though, at local meets, it's just random. They don't do lot numbers. And you could be in the 3rd flight and they just say, okay, weigh-ins are open, get in line. Same thing as showing up early the night before to get familiarized with the situation. I always recommend people getting there 30 minutes before weigh-ins. So if you're somebody who, if you're competing in USA Powerlifting and it's a 7 a.m. weigh-in, 9 a.m. start time, I would get there at 6:30 and just be ready. Even if you're told that it's gonna be lot numbers, I would still just get there and be ready, make sure that nothing goofy has happened, and that you're actually there on time, car troubles or those kind of things. Because whether it's a line or whether it's lot numbers, and they call your name and they miss your number, you get pushed to the back of the line. So even if you're not cutting weight, this will be something that matters, right? It adds stress to your day. It makes it to where you're now uncomfortable with the situation. And if you are, let's say you're right at maybe the top of the weight class and you didn't cut weight, but you don't want to eat in order to make your weight class, then you have to wait until after weigh-ins, and it could take 45 minutes or so for you to get your weigh-in done, and then you're put in a position to where now you've lost a good amount of time. So getting there early and again just being prepared makes a really big difference. So at weigh-ins, you'll also need your openers, which we'll talk about the attempt planning and everything here in a second, but make sure that you had your openers in kilograms. every competition, almost all of them, will compete in kilos. So I'll also have a kilo conversion chart below in the description. So you should have, if you're using my spreadsheet or you're using your own spreadsheet for attempt plans, then you should have those numbers in kilos. But I would say a lot of people here are probably lifting in pounds, and so a lot of their goals are going to be in pounds. But you need to have your openers in kilos so that you're prepared for that and not fumbling around or turning in an inaccurate number. So at weigh-ins, they'll get your rack heights, they'll get your openers, get your weight, and then you're good to go. So let's say you weigh in 7 a.m. It's pretty early, 7:15, and you're in the second flight. So you get a good amount of time to sit around and wait. And I think this is one of the biggest areas where people do not that good of a job, especially at early competitions, is they don't pace themselves very well, and they're very anxious right away. It's really, really important for you to, at these competitions, learn a good pacing, learn a good timing, and learn when to relax. After weigh-ins, it's okay to chill and relax. And for me, I like a little bit more harsh music. After weigh-ins, I'm not listening to that. I'm just hanging out, I'm eating, I'm snacking, I'm drinking water. And here is one of the biggest thoughts, one of the biggest questions that people had for their competitions is, what do they eat on competition day? So, assuming you didn't cut, and even if you did cut a little bit, the advice is not going to be all that different. You need to prioritize how comfortable that you feel. So you shouldn't be going in to the meet thinking that you need to just absolutely optimize everything or just stuff yourself with the most disgusting food ever. You should be eating foods that you know digest well. For me, I'm just snacking on foods like bagels and carb heavy foods, so pretzels and some chips, and drinking water. Even having like a little bit of some sodium packets, that triorals or whatever, you can put those in your water. But I think a big mistake that people make, in newer meets is they see some of these advanced lifters doing these they're really trying to rehydrate really quickly, and they're really stuffing themselves, and they feel very, very bad afterwards, or they eat foods that don't settle well. You shouldn't be eating cake and stuff, pastas. Just eat things that you know that your body handles well and that you can snack on and feel pretty comfortable between weigh-ins and warm-up time. Don't start taking caffeine right away. You should start taking caffeine about when you're starting to warm up, right? Because you're gonna have about 30 minutes or so from the time you start warming up to you hitting the platform. That is plenty of time for your caffeine to get going. And especially you're gonna have from the time you start warming up to your third attempt, it may be about an hour. So if you take too much caffeine too early, you're gonna be sitting around being really anxious, and that can dramatically affect things later on in the day. So for a new competitor, one of the best things about competition is just the camaraderie, right? Getting to know some of the other competitors, doing it with a group of friends, and just having a good time, being able to relax. You still are gonna take it seriously. I take these things very, very seriously, even at local meets, but you still wanna be able to relax and have fun and kind of get into a mood. But when it's warm-up time, put those headphones on, take it serious, and then we get going. So as far as warm-ups go, one of the biggest things that I recommend lifters do is get some of their first few warm-ups done pretty quickly. So we will have a plan. In the attempts plan that we're gonna go over here very shortly, there's gonna be warm-ups that are on there. Another video that I'm planning on making is going to be a how to warm up video, and how many how many warm-ups that you should have in your standard warm-up in order to feel prepared. So that video is coming. We'll go over it a little bit more, but it should be something that you're very familiar with in general. You should be doing this in training. It shouldn't be a surprise. So when you're warming up, you should be able to get through those first 3 warm-ups or so very quickly. Most of the time, competitors have 5 or 6 warm-ups that they have to do. So if you're doing the empty bar, 1 plate, maybe 225 on there, I usually recommend people getting through those very, very quickly. So whenever you're ready to go, you do your bodyweight squats, whatever, get through those first few warm-ups fast so that you can set yourself a good pace for later on and things aren't bunched up. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes that people make, is that they start warming up and they either warm up way, way too early, right? They get going, they're just nervous and they start going and they have to sit around for a long time, or they wait too long and all of a sudden things are kind of chaotic and they just don't get their warm-ups in a position that they really want them to be able to. So as far as warm-up timing, the things that you should be looking for, the main thing that you should be looking for is you should be taking your last warm-up equal to your first attempt in whenever your flight is starting. So the easiest example here is saying that you are flight B. I'm gonna come back to flight A, but we'll start with flight B because this will make sense. I'm gonna do some screen recording on Lift and Cast when there's some actual meets going so I can be able to show this. But let's say that you are the 4th squatter in your flight. So there's 3 people going ahead of you. If you're looking at Lift and Cast, you can see as the live scoring is happening, you're in flight B, flight A is on their 3rd squat attempt. You should be taking your last warm-up around when the 4th squatter is taking their last squat. So that will essentially give you a full attempt timing, right? So you're essentially doing your last warm-up as your attempt 0, and then you get that same pace all the way back around to your first attempt. It doesn't have to be exact. You can wait a little bit longer. Probably doing it too early is a little bit worse than doing it too late, but around that time is a really good time to try to plan it. So do the math backwards. Look at when you need that attempt to be taken, and then look at when you need the other attempts to be taken, and you just speed through the first warm-ups to set up that timing later. If you're in the first flight, sometimes it's a little bit, it can be easy, but sometimes the timing can be a little bit awkward. If you're the 4th lifter in the flight, I would assume that every lifter is going to take right about 1 minute for the attempt, for plate changes, for all of that to happen. So if you're the 4th lifter and the lift starts at 9 a.m., you should expect to be taking your first attempt around 9:04. So if we work backwards from there, you can see how many people are in your flight, whatever. Anyway, I would allow 7 minutes, 8 minutes, something like that from 9:04, do the math backwards, and you should be taking your last warm-up somewhere, we'll call it 8:55, right? So you got 9 minutes. That would be a really, really good timing for you to hit your last warm-up. This is where it can get a little bit confusing at times, as sometimes local meets don't start exactly on time. Local meets should be making announcements, but as it's getting closer to that 8:30 range, if there's not a clock going down, you may just ask somebody, one of the directors or somebody in uniform, if they're planning, just ask, are you planning on starting on time? And if the answer is yes, just assume that'll be the case and you can go from there. So that'll be true with all of your lifts. Squat, bench, and deadlift, the order will flow the same. There's always going to be a 10-minute break between disciplines. So between squat and between bench press, there will be a 10-minute break. So if there's just a single flight meet, it's gonna be 20 minutes. But if you're in the first flight, as soon as the 3rd flight goes, there'll be 10 minutes and then you'll start. So take in everything that I said right there and use that protocol to warm up for bench press, to warm up for deadlift. So most of the time squat takes the longest, there's the most equipment to put on and all of those kind of things. But just making sure that you're warmed up and ready to go on time and not too early, not too late, makes a really, really big difference for people. And one of the most important things for success at any level, whether you're a new person later in your career as a powerlifter, having somebody to help you, having a handler at the competitions makes a huge difference. So at big competitions, I coach myself, right? I write all my training and everything. So I have somebody who I outsource it to. It's somebody that I've worked regularly at these big competitions who I communicate with a little bit ahead of time and helps me choose my attempts, but more than anything, helps me load plates and helps me with timing. If you're somebody who is a newer lifter or you're coached remotely from somebody and your coach can't be there, just having somebody who understands the things that I'm saying, understands the warm-up timing, have them watch this video. And that makes the biggest difference in the world so that you are able to focus on your lifting, so that you can focus on the things that matter in the moment to you, and you're not having to worry about the timing and fight other lifters for spots on the warm-up platform. And it is so, so important to not have to wear yourself out loading and unloading plates and dealing with all of that the whole time. So get a handler. It can be anybody. It can be your significant other. It can be your mom, your dad, whatever. I've had my dad handle me. I've had my girlfriend handle me. it doesn't really matter. It just needs to be somebody who is physically able to move plates, load plates, and keep up with timing and just help you out there. And even if they don't necessarily know, if I'm working with somebody who doesn't know exactly when they need to be doing things, or potentially maybe not all that assertive or whatever, you can easily keep up with stuff on Lifting Cast. You can have your warm-ups available, and you just tell the person that you need 2 reds and a green on 13, and they should be able to do it. And there's plenty of time between warm-ups and between weigh-ins and warm-ups to where you can have that person familiarize themselves with the rack and just get comfortable in general. And that leads me to one of the most important points, is that if you are a coach there or a lifter, being good working in with others is going to be so critical at the local level and early in competitions, because it's chaotic. It is absolutely going to be chaotic. So ahead of time, after weigh-ins, scope out what rack you want to be on. See, people are going to be mingling around the racks. And if you're the handler, if you're the coach or whoever, you can go over and find a coach and say, hey, how many do you have over here? And if it's something like they have 5, maybe find a different rack. But if it's 2 or 3 lifters on a rack, just tell them, all right, cool, we're gonna warm up with you guys. And so then at that point, you should find the person, hopefully they have a coach as well, and just talk to them a little bit and just kind of communicate with where they are going to be, with where their lifter is going to be in the order of flights. And so you guys together can plan when your lifters need to go. Because especially at the end, lots of coaches, myself and other coaches, are going to be very picky about when their lifter takes especially that last warm up. And getting 2 minutes behind, if you're planning on taking your last warm up 6 minutes out and it gets pushed down to 4, can be troublesome and worrisome for a lot of coaches and a lot of lifters. So communicating well and helping the other coaches and being good with the rack and being good with loading those things is a skill. You get better at it, but you can practice these things and be prepared ahead of time to be able to work with the other coaches and communicate well. And so if you are on your own, if you're a lifter that's on your own, this is gonna be a big burden. It's not gonna be something that is easily done. Even if it's just, you by yourself, you're only having to think about yourself, it's still a stressor, it's still physical, it's still something that takes some effort to do. So just as a coach, I know a lot of times after competitions, I'm more tired than I was as a lifter. As a lifter, you should have time being able to sit around and eat and drink water. As a coach, a lot of times you're not, right? Your easiest time is generally gonna be when the lifter is actually on the platform or between attempts, because you're not really doing much. They do their attempt, you turn in the scoring, we'll get to scoring. You turn in the next attempt, and then you're able to sit around. But during warm-ups, a lot of times you're having to communicate with other coaches and be proactive. And that's something as a lifter, you should not have to do by yourself. So please get a handler. It doesn't need to be somebody perfect. It can be a friend, another powerlifter. It can be anybody, but that will be critical for the success of your day. And just remind that handler to do a good job of communicating with the other coaches, and it'll definitely help out. So some little details that I think new lifters tend to not really think about a whole lot. Everyone is aware of the commands that or at least that there are commands. So when you're reading the rule book, make sure that you familiarize yourself with the commands from every lift. For squat, it's just squat and rack. They don't tell you when to come up. For bench press, it's going to be start, press, rack. And for deadlift, it is only down, right? So you can walk out to the platform and pick it up on your own. New lifters almost always are going to jump one of those commands. So if it's usually squat or bench press is really where it happens for the most part, that somebody walks out the squat and then just goes, or on bench press, they unrack it and just go, or just jump the rack command. It's really, really common. It's also very easy to not do, right? So you should be going out there, your opener should be a fairly easy attempt, and you should be able to calm yourself in such a way. You're gonna be nervous. You just accept that you're gonna be nervous out there, but wait and listen to those commands. The head judge that you're looking directly at, that's gonna be right in front of you, that's giving you the command, is waiting on side judges. So if you walk it out and the head judge is gonna be holding his or her hand up, the side judges are waiting for you to settle, waiting for you to lock your knees. Again, all this stuff is in the rule book. And then the side judges will give a start command. You can't see that, it doesn't matter. But the head judge is waiting for them to say that you're good to go, for the head judge to say start. It feels like a long time, right? It's a couple of seconds, 2 or 3 seconds of walking out and standing there. And oftentimes I have lifters that will jump this command knowing that they need to wait for it, and they just jump it. And they say, well, it was taking a long time. I just and they just go. Wait. You just have to wait. If they don't, or if they're not giving you the start command for whatever reason, your knees aren't locked or whatever, most of the time they'll tell you, lock your knees, something like that, or they'll make you re-rack it if it's something that they're not going to give you a start command. And they can tell you can ask, and they'll say, oh, your knees weren't locked, your hips weren't locked, whatever, right? And then you can walk it out again and try again. You have a full minute. From the time that they say, bar's loaded, you should be standing right there at the staging area. You walk out to the platform and you have a minute. It's a long time. Even if you walk it out, from you walking out, getting under the bar and walking out, it's probably 20 seconds. So if they make you re-rack it, that's at most taken 30 seconds or so, right? You still have that full other 30 seconds to readjust. You don't have to be done with the attempt. You just have to get a start command. So if they make you re-rack it, it's okay. Just calm down, right? Take your time, lock your knees or whatever they're telling you to do. And then they'll say start, and almost always people have plenty of time. So the worst thing that you can do is get in a big hurry. Maybe even worse than that is jump a command on your first attempt, and then now your first competition, you've missed your first lift, and now you're even more nervous and you have to decide what to do from there. So after you make your first attempt, we'll say you made it for sure. After that, there's always going to be a scoring table. So after your first attempt, you have 1 minute to submit your next attempt. You should have your attempt plan. We're getting there. You should have your attempt plan, or if you're not using that, almost always they have a kilo conversion chart right there. And go and give the scoring table your next attempt in kilos. There's 1 minute to do it. It's a long time. Again, 1 minute is forever. So you can sit there and you can talk to your coach or whoever, just decide for a second, you can calm down, wait just a second, and you have 1 minute to turn in your score or your next attempt. Most of the time, they'll have a little card that you have to put, circle squat, circle second attempt, and write the number in kilos and hand it to them. Sometimes you just say it. I would prefer to have the score actually be able to write it down, so if there's a mistake, you can actually refer to it. But anyway, not all meets do that, but just plan to write it down and give it to them in kilos for your second attempt. If you don't turn in an attempt, if you miss the attempt, automatically they will repeat the attempt for you. So if your opener is 150 kilos and you miss it, 150 kilos will go back on the bar if you don't say anything. If you made it, if you make 150 and don't say anything, it will go to 152.5. They'll bump it up to the next available number, 2.5 kilos. So you can only change attempts on your third deadlift. If you mess up and you miss, you time out, you don't turn in the attempt, that attempt is stuck. You can't change it. So be ready to go to the scoring table and turn something in. And if something happens and your attempt is up like incredibly hard, you can either just scratch it, which will turn into 0 and you don't have to take the next attempt. Or what I'd recommend newer competitors do, anybody really, is you don't have to tell the scoring table anything, but they'll go up 2.5 kilos, and then you don't have to go out there. You can just time out on that attempt. So anyway, wait for the judges. Wait for the judges. Turn in the attempts. You just wait for the command to slow down. These are the aspects of a powerlifting meet that are more difficult. When you're choosing attempts, when you're doing all that, it's not on your time, right? So you're having to adhere to somebody else's schedule and turn in wait for commands and just slow down. And it's just gonna be a little different than what you would normally have in the gym. So taking in all of these things into account is really gonna impact attempt selection, and you just need to be able to be smart and prepared to come out of that really successfully. So on the note of attempt selection, I have a free sheet available. So that'll be in the description below. You'll click on, it's going to be the same length as my free program stuff that's available. So if you go there, make a copy of that sheet, and then you'll have a meet planner. So what you'll see in the meet planner is that we always have plan A, B, and C in every lift. What I usually tell people is that plan B is an average day. You shouldn't think of plan A as your primary day. Plan A should be a good day. Plan A should be, I'm feeling on, I'm gonna go for it. It's a bit of a reach on plan A. Plan B is much more in line with what you would expect to be kind of average. I mean, average, it's still good, right? Like a 9.5 RPE, on your third attempt or whatever. It's still a difficult rep, like you're feeling pretty good on plan B. But we also need to have a plan C if you're having a bad day. It happens, right? I'm sure everyone out there has had a day that they expected to be very strong. They go into the gym and it's just not. That happens in competition too. And we need to be able to have plans for that and to still make those attempts and build the biggest total that we possibly can. So here is probably the most critical aspect of this video, and maybe the one that's most applicable to lifters later on in their lifting careers. Attempt selection tends to be pretty poor overall, and I think a lot of times it's more, I don't know if ego is the right word, but excitement and people really wanting to do everything they possibly can to just have the best meet of their lives every single time. And if you could look at my numbers in my early meets, and there is so much more red in those early meets. And now later, I'm pretty much making all of my lifts. I'm going 8 for 9 or 9 for 9 every single time. And it's just about doing better with attempt selection and being more conservative with openers and those kind of things. So when we're using this spreadsheet, we're gonna start by putting in, by the way, the spreadsheet is going to use kilos as the primary source of your inputs. The pounds will be reflected there, but you may need a kilo conversion guide to do it well, but I have it to where it's kilos is really what you're choosing. But if you put in a kilo number in all those blank spaces, the pound number will show you so you can have some manipulations there. But I would only mess with the kilo area. If you mess with a pound number, it's gonna get all messed up, so you may have to start over with the spreadsheet. So anyway, what you wanna start off with is your squat, bench, and deadlift on the top right of the spreadsheet. So put in your goal numbers there in kilograms. The spreadsheet will populate. It'll come up with, based on percentages, what it expects, or what I expect, I guess, because I put it together. A good starting point would be for all your attempts and your last warm-up. It's not populating the rest of the warm-ups. So my video on warm-ups will address all of this a little bit further, and I'll talk about even attempt selection in that video as well. But the warm-ups should be something that makes sense. We just have your last warm-up and you can work backwards from there based on what you would do in the gym. So the worst thing that can happen, I think, is that people, I said it earlier in the video, is you cannot overcome a bad plan. Most of the time, people's bad plans start with a bad opener. And almost always, I think when I'm talking to newer lifters, less experienced lifters, people have this weird connection to what they think their opener needs to be. They really think like, okay, so I hit X number, I really want to open there. But why though? Like, what do you think your top end is? And if your top end is not significantly further than that, or if you're relying on a very good day that you've only experienced in the gym a couple of times, then your opener is not going to be, it just doesn't matter. It does not matter what you open with. And it's purely an ego thing to try to open with a high number and then you run out of options. You hit your big, nice opener and it's an RPE 9, then you try to go up 5 kilos and then you miss it. Okay, well, you had a great opener, but then you went 1 for 3 and that doesn't really make sense. And so what we need to do when we're coming up with our attempt plan is work from the top down. Now, again, people can still make this mistake to where they just have unrealistic expectations for what their top end can and should be. It should be something that is realistic based on your training. And if you're somebody who is doing their first competition, you don't really have the data, you don't have the experience to know that X numbers will correlate to X in competition. Don't assume the taper will save you. Don't assume that you're gonna have some amazing peak, that you're feeling really tired now, but you're gonna do this taper and all of a sudden you're gonna have the strongest day of your life. Most of the time, the expectation in competition should be that we get out of you the best or very good training that you had in the gym. right? Hopefully on all 3 lifts. There's gonna be absolutely some expectations for some people that certain lifts we just know do very, very well in competition. But also, some people tend to do poorly in competition. So bench press tends to be one of those. People are unprepared to be able to have to unrack and hold it for a long time and hold longer pauses and all of those. And so people, newer lifters in particular, tend to underperform. They tend to overestimate what their ability will be on bench press in particular, but most lifts. And I would say it would be a great thing for you as a new lifter to come out of the competition thinking, oh man, I had 5 more kilos. Why didn't I do more? Great, right? That'll set you up for more success at the next competition. And you can just continue to build and you get more confident. You get more confident in your abilities. You get better at doing the competition. Competing is a skill. Just getting good at the rhythm of the day and everything that goes into it will make you better at making lifts. And so if you are more conservative early on and not get caught up in, I really want my opener to be X number, then you're gonna set yourself up for significantly more success. So don't adhere to, I think some of the guidelines are things like, your opener should be your best triple in the gym. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter rep ranges or those kind of things. Set an appropriate goal for your 3rd attempt and then work backwards from there. A lighter opener is always better than too heavy of an opener. If you open too heavy, you run out of options and you're just gonna put yourself into a bad position. So after your 1st attempt, if you don't have, full excitement, if you hit your 1st attempt and you're just not like, yes, I'm feeling so good, go with plan B, right? You don't have to make that reach to plan A and put yourself in a bad situation. Or if you are feeling good and you take that A attempt, you can always go back down. All of the numbers on the plan are there are guidelines, there are estimations. Sometimes there's gaps between them. Be smart, but having a plan and sticking to it can make your first experience and all of your later experiences so much better. So you can't outdo a bad plan. If you plan poorly, if you open too heavy, if you plan too heavy of a 3rd, whatever, you're never gonna be able to overcome that. But you can very easily ruin a very good day with a bad plan. So you could be having the best day of your life, but you end up having crazy stuff, making really bad attempts, and it's just not gonna play out very well at all. So make sure that you're smart, and especially as a newer lifter, being a little bit more conservative is significantly better than being too aggressive. So to wrap things up, I maybe just have some random thoughts here and there on just the day in general and some little tips and tricks and those kind of things. So one of the first things that I think new people really mess up is caffeine. Extra caffeine can certainly help, but you can absolutely overdo it and you take way too much and you get really jittery and you feel really anxious and you just get in a big hurry. It's something that you can definitely increase your performance with, but if you're already feeling nervous and already feeling anxious, I don't think that it adds the value that people really think. So caffeine, along with food and just pacing yourself emotionally, are things that you have to learn through time. And the worst thing that can happen is you take a whole lot of caffeine early in the day, you get really worked up for squats, you kind of stay worked up, you drink more caffeine, you're all excited, and then you get to deadlift and it's a 3-flight meet and the meet is really dragging on, and now you're just emotionally drained. I see it happen all the time. I've been there, I've done it. So practice learning when to chill out a little bit. After your 3rd attempt, you can be excited for a second, sit down and relax and snack a little bit and be able to kind of turn your brain off for a second, and then practice getting back up, getting elevated a little bit. It's something that really does take practice to be able to have a good competition. It's so common for people to burn out by the end of the day. And I think most of the time it's not about nutrition. I think people are usually aware that they need to be eating and drinking stuff. I think more often than not, it's just about the emotional aspect of it and trying to stay engaged the whole time. And it really can be pretty difficult. So another little thought here too is baby powder. So baby powder can make a huge difference for people's deadlifts in the competition and really locking out the 3rd. Whether you're a sumo puller and you're dragging across the thighs, or conventional deadlifter and you kind of have trouble at lockout and you just need the bar to move across your legs really well, baby powder makes a huge difference. And there's also where having a handler makes a really big difference as well. Don't touch the baby powder. You as a lifter, do not touch the baby powder. So it should, and almost always they're gonna have an area set aside for baby powder, so please use that area. But what you should have happen is the handler. If you're sumo, it'll be on the inside of your legs. If you're conventional, it'll be more on the top of your thighs. And down your shins, whatever, but thighs and stuff that are upper thighs is more important. So the handler, we'll throw it on your legs and then kind of smooth it out a little bit. Don't touch the handler's hand. So what I always do is I loop the crook of my arm around the lifter's arm, or my handler's arm, and pick them up from there. Don't touch the baby powder. When you get out to the platform, especially if you're a sumo deadlifter, wipe your feet off, right? Because it's gonna be slick a little bit. So sometimes you can even get sometimes they have like little wet rags or something in the back area, and you can just tap your feet on it and then dry your feet off. But just making sure that you're getting that baby powder off the bottom of your feet can help a lot in just how you feel out there. So don't touch the baby powder and wipe your feet off. Chalk also makes a really big difference on squat and bench press, probably more than people would think. Obviously deadlift, but who knows? Of course people know that. So chalking your upper back really helps a lot for both squat and bench press. Don't chalk people's butts. It's stupid. It doesn't help. Your butt does not have friction there. People's butts come off because people are driving their hips up or whatever. And if anything, having white on the bottom of the butt will help the judge see if the butt comes up easier, right? Most people's singlets are black, the bench is black. Sometimes it's difficult to tell how much butt is up, and you could get the benefit of the doubt because of that. If it's white, it added no assistance as far as friction on the bench, but you may be able to see it a little bit better, and it just looks stupid. So don't make people aware that you don't know what you're doing. If you're new, you don't need people, more people to know how new you are. Don't chalk people's butts. So the final thing is just have fun. The whole point of these days, it should be, we worked really, really hard for this. I think in general, people are competing twice a year. It's something that is a big, an exciting day. If it's your first competition, then obviously you're gonna be really excited and nervous and all that. Enjoy the day. We wanna take it serious and we wanna try really hard. But being engaged with other competitors and actually enjoying the process, engaging with the crowd or doing whatever, right? Slowing down enough to actually enjoy that day and kind of interact with other people, I think really, really gets people into it. So, it should be something you take seriously. We know people are trying really hard. We invest so much time. I don't know how long this video is, but if you've watched a 30+ long, minute video on attempts, so it's something that you care about. It's something that you have a big time investment into. But if you are brooding and you're having just a very emotional kind of day, and whether it goes well or not, I think that kind of takes away a little bit from the experience. So as you get more competitive and all that, maybe the outcome is a lot more important than the experience. But for sure, putting yourself in a situation around other lifters and competitors and coaches and getting engaged with the sport, I think can make a huge difference, and is one of the biggest reasons why we do these things in the first place. So I think I covered all of it. I don't know how much is left there. I'm sure there's a lot of minor details. We're gonna talk more about attempt selection a little bit when I talk about the warm-up video and just kind of how you should be planning all of those kind of things. At some point I'll come out with a weight cutting guide as well, or just talking about weight manipulation. But for sure, I have a video planned on why people should not cut weight, I guess, and more so not about cutting weight, but just more about giving yourself opportunities to build and get better. And I think cutting weight kind of goes along with that. So those videos will definitely be coming along with many others. So hopefully this video was helpful. If it was, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.